Good morning. This is the morning meeting. The morning meeting brought to you by C-SPAN. C-SPAN, Brian Lamb's gift to North America, because why should the cameras move? And by, good morning, everybody. Thank you for joining. This is the morning meeting. Dan, Sean, and I are going to run through the day's events with our special guest, Congressman Mike Lawler of New York, and then we'll take your questions. As always, and I remind people, particularly when we have somebody like a member of the Congress on, they're not kings and queens, but they are public servants. So as always, presumption of grace, peace, love, and understanding. We're going to want to call on a lot of you to let you ask the congressman questions. Delighted to have the opportunity. He loves the platform, big fan. We're big fans of anyone who wants to come participate in this unique form of public communication. So we'll get to your questions. Please raise your hand. Our roll continues. We had new people on last night, never spoken before. Fantastic. Again, if you've never raised your hand, now's the opportunity. And particularly if you're a Democrat, even though our guest today is a Republican, please raise your hand and participate. Gentlemen, are you ready? Here we go. Donald Trump today signs the Lake and Riley Act. He signs an executive order on school choice, which is a sleeper issue, which we're going to be talking a lot about. We talked yesterday morning about doing an education show. That's in the works. It's also apparently, according to CBS News, he's going to sign another executive order on anti-Semitism. I suspect there'll be additional ones, so we'll watch that. Not sure when that happens. I think it's the afternoon. The vice president tapes an interview with Sean Hannity that airs at 9. There perhaps will be a clip out earlier that we'll be able to show you on two-way tonight at 6 o'clock. Marco Rubio, Secretary of State, meets with his Canadian counterpart. Everyone on here knows, say it with me now, the Canadian Foreign Minister, Melanie Joly, or Joly, Joly. That happens in Washington today. Steve Witkoff, the president's special envoy to the Middle East, has already been to Gaza today and is meeting at some point, maybe at this hour, as they say in the news business, with Bibi Netanyahu, comes to Washington next week to probably be the first foreign leader who gets a face-to-face with President Trump. Lots going on with the House, even though the Congress, rather. The House is not in session. The final day of meetings at Doral of the House Republican Conference is taking place at this hour. Earlier today, the leaders held a press conference. Different Senate House leaders will have another press conference to close the event at 11. Senate filled with, also in the House at 1 o'clock, the Democratic caucus is having what they call a quote emergency virtual meeting to talk about how to react to all the actions taken by the Republican White House. Senate is filled with confirmation stuff. The marquee event that most people are geared for, we'll talk about. Bobby Kennedy, 10 a.m. Also at 10 a.m., Howard Lutnick for Commerce. 2:30, Kelly Loeffler for SBA. 3:30, they vote on the floor on Lee Zeldin for EPA and Doug Burgum for Interior. And Bob Menendez is being sentenced
Who do you
today.
think gets more votes, Burgum or Zeldin?
Zeldin.
I'll take that bet.
You know why I say Zeldin? Because they vote against billionaires. That's why I say Zeldin. He's not a billionaire, so
I'll take the bet.
He just represented a lot of them in the Hamptons for years. Yep.
All right. Now, I see Congressman Lawler's here, so somebody's going to bring him in, and we're going to start talking about stuff. We're gonna let's start with the House, because the congressman has been at this event, and Marjorie Taylor Greene contains multitudes and speaks for multitudes. And this morning, she took to Twitter to put her own imprint on the meeting. Congressman, welcome. Oh, there you go. Congressman, welcome. Are you staying? Let's get you unmuted. Are you staying at the Trump Doral?
Hey, Mark. How are you?
Welcome.
Yeah.
Thank you for joining us. Are you staying at the Trump Doral? Is that your room we're seeing in the Trump Doral?
Yeah, I'm in.
How was it? How was the hotel? Forget the meeting. How was the hotel?
It's actually very nice. It's actually the first time I've stayed at a Trump property.
Yeah. Now, do you carry cash to tip the chambermaid?
Yes, I have cash on me at all times.
Okay. I carry Starbucks gift cards.
Ugh.
That's what I tip with. No, just kidding. I know people.
You don't like Starbucks, Sean?
What's that? No, I hate Starbucks.
He's a Rhode Island man.
He's a Dunkin'.
Those are fighting words.
I like both. I like both.
So, Congressman, welcome. We're happy to have you here. We're going to start talking about the meeting you're at, and we're going to start with your colleague, Marjorie Taylor Greene, one of your favorites, I think. She tweeted this morning, put up the first of it. It's a long tweet. I'm not going to read the whole thing. But here's her take on the meeting that just is concluding today. After 2 days at our House Republican winter retreat, we still do not have a plan on budget reconciliation, and our Speaker and his team have not offered one. Not even if we are in a one bill or two bill framework, even though President Trump, who prefers one big, beautiful bill, literally told us here at the start of our conference that he now does not care if it's one or two. Basically, just get started doing something. Next, please. We have only been presented with the same policy and budget cut proposals that we've been presented with for a month now at all our meetings and at a full Saturday conference meeting earlier this month. I would say sink or swim, but our country is already sinking, so we must swim. She goes on to basically say nothing got accomplished, and you all should be gearing up to basically pass laws that mirror President Trump's executive orders. So, Congressman, do you share her view that not much got done, or do you have a different view?
Look, I think that's probably a relatively shared sentiment across the conference. Insofar as, with a small majority, it's very difficult to kind of navigate people in the direction that you need to go. You have people like Chip Roy, who didn't come but was, tweeting about the conference and basically had sent a letter at the beginning of the conference saying, providing a list of demands. So obviously, I think the speaker has a very difficult challenge in navigating, to 218 votes. I think when the president said during his remarks that he didn't care whether it was one or two bills, that obviously complicates the negotiation. I mean, the fact is, in my view, it's one bill. I just looking at the challenges we have had over the last 2 years and the challenges ahead, the reality is everybody needs to have skin in the game. And if you make it two separate bills, you're going to run into a situation where some of the people, frankly, are not going to be there on the second bill. And that's just my perspective on it, based on having witnessed how people behave and how they act, and their inability to work as one team. So, look, I think obviously ideally, the play call will be made. It will be one bill, and we will start getting the meat on the bones, if you will, as to the specifics. And I'll give you a case in point. One of the things that we've been waiting on, myself and some of my SALT colleagues, is specific numbers from the Ways and Means Committee staff so that we can actually come to a number. It's hard to come up with a concrete number when you don't have specific numbers to work off of, and both in terms of cost as well as impact on your specific district. So there's still a lot of work to do, obviously. I think the objective of conferences like this are to get everybody, for the most part, in the room. I think we had about 170 members or so here. I think Marjorie's right. A lot of the conversations have been very similar to what has been happening. But we have to really start coming to some decision points here. And I hope coming out of this conference that leadership starts making very clear decisions as to the path forward. And at the end of the day, pardon my French, but we got to shit or get off the pot here.
Yeah. What timetable is realistic for one big, beautiful bill? When could it realistically pass?
Well, obviously, we have to pass a bill through the House and the Senate. They have to be exactly the same. Then you get reconciliation instructions. The time frame the speaker has put forth is to have it in April. I think sometime between April and Memorial Day is realistic if we, obviously start proceeding forward very, very expeditiously. The other part of this is obviously the fiscal year 25 appropriations are coming up due March 14th. So you add that in the middle of all this as well. And I do believe the Appropriations Committee can get that done, but they need a top line number to work off of because the Senate and the House right now are not on the same page on that top line number.
One more question for me, and then I'll turn you over to Sean and Dan. What's the posture of the conference towards your Senate colleagues? Is there a great deal of trust? Is there concern that it will be hard to strike a deal with them, or somewhere in between, or something else?
I think there's a great deal of trust. I think, look, at the end of the day, as I've said many times, anybody who's ever been married knows you have to compromise. You're not going to get everything you want in a negotiation here. I think, the Senate has its own set of unique challenges, and so do we. And so, you have to find avenue to bring that together. I think with President Trump in there, it's going to put pressure on a lot of people to come to an agreement. I mean, the American people gave us an opportunity to govern. They gave us an opportunity to move forward on the items that we talked about during the campaign, from the border to the economy and taxes, to energy policy, to reining in our national debt and spending. But in order to get there, you're going to have to make some tough decisions along the way. Everybody's going to have to eat something that they don't like, and recognize that in order to get the bigger bill passed, you're going to have to make some tough choices, and everybody's going to have to give a little to get what they want. And that's why, one of the things I've been very clear about is SALT. SALT was a pay for on the 2017 Tax Cuts and Jobs Act. For those that say, oh, we're subsidizing bad blue state policy, that's nonsense. At the end of the day, it's double taxation, number one. Number two, New York sends more money down to Washington than it gets back. There are red states who have, quote unquote, great governance that are actually getting more from the federal government than they are, in fact, sending to the federal government. So, the fact is, all of us can sit and play that game of who's getting what. But at the end of the day, this is an issue that matters. It matters to my district. It matters to my constituents. And I've been very clear that I will not support a tax bill that doesn't address the issue of SALT. And here's the political reality. If we do nothing on taxes, if we let the Tax Cuts and Jobs Act expire entirely, SALT comes back unlimited. However, it would be associated with the largest tax increase in American history, and the alternative minimum tax would come back in spades. So to me, the objective is for everybody to negotiate in good faith, recognize that there's an opportunity here to find some compromises, find some wins for everybody, but ultimately pass a bill that is necessary if we're going to address the larger challenges facing the country.
All right, so we're going to move to stay on this topic, Sean and Dan, or you can move to the first week actions of the Trump administration and see what the congressman thinks of those. Sean.
So I want to go back to what Mark started with Marjorie's tweet. What were your expectations going into this? I mean, did you actually, I can't, well, I'll let you answer the question because I just can't believe that, having been to a few of these, that there were you're going to all walk out going, here's the bill.
Yeah, that was not my expectation. Oftentimes I think the media's expectation of what these meetings are going to be versus reality is very different. This is a negotiation, and it's not going to be resolved just because leadership says this is what we're doing, or a few members demand a few things. At the end of the day, we are working through this process. We have had numerous meetings on Capitol Hill going through the framework. Yes, I think it will be helpful if we could finally settle the issue of one bill versus two bills and resolve that for good, because that obviously has a big impact on what is negotiated and the time frame for it. If it's two bills, that obviously will expedite the first one, but I think the second one will become a lot harder. So it's a calculation that leadership and the White House need to make, but there needs to be a concrete decision on it, and it needs to happen soon. That being said, I mean, the first step is passing a budget resolution here. So that is the most immediate issue. We're having another meeting in about 15 minutes. So when I'm done here, I'm going to that meeting. But ultimately the objective is to continue to advance the ball forward. And I empathize and understand, Marjorie's frustration and that of many of my colleagues. And, the process itself can always be frustrating, but as is often relayed, this is the sausage making. It's not pretty. It takes time. There's a lot of egos to be stroked and a lot of concerns to be assuaged. So this is never going to be resolved in one sitting, and it's certainly not going to be resolved in a conference where you have the media camped out, you have, lobbyists here and others. I mean, it's going to be resolved as we continue to do the work in committee and in smaller group settings.
Dan.
So I have two questions. One, how is the conversation going about addressing the debt ceiling?
Look, the debt ceiling itself, obviously is an issue of top concern to the president. Obviously his concern is more about the fact that the Democrats want to use it as leverage, as Republicans have used it as leverage in the past, and Democrats before them. It's become a political piñata. And frankly, that's why I'm open to eliminating the debt ceiling entirely, because it doesn't actually serve a purpose. We have previous debts incurred that we have to pay, period. Like, the idea that you're going to default on your previous debts incurred is stupid. So the debt ceiling itself isn't really, to me, the issue. The issue is appropriations and the spending long term. How it's going to be addressed, there's two ways to address it. One will be through reconciliation, which I think is the president's preferred course. The other would be through the fiscal year 25 appropriations, most likely. Or put it together with something else that is kind of a must pass. But obviously, if you are reliant on Democratic votes in the Senate to pass it, then there's going to be a bipartisan negotiation, which obviously Chuck Schumer and Senate Democrats will try to use to extract as much as they can. And that's really what the president's concern is. Last time he was president and Nancy Pelosi and Chuck Schumer had control, they fought to, increase spending. And that's what they did as part of lifting the debt ceiling. So, I think it is not resolved yet what the pathway forward is on that, but obviously that's part of the discussions as to reconciliation, to get buy-in. But listen, we have people in our conference who have never voted to lift the debt ceiling. So it's obviously a bit of a sticky issue.
Dan, second question.
Yeah, the second question is, you talked about the policy side kind of cuts. There have been a lot of reports that the kind of listening sessions or presentations that committees are doing on various cuts are meeting a lot of resistance. People are saying, various caucuses within the conference say, wait a sec, you can't touch this. And then yesterday you get the kind of fiasco around the freeze and all the misunderstanding and clarifications. You guys were meeting, in the middle of that. How is that conversation, or how was it impacted by yesterday and the, things to cut, services to eliminate?
Well, I can tell you, I spent a lot of my day yesterday responding to, very upset and concerned nonprofit entities, and, agencies that provide critical services to, the IDD community, for instance. And, I spoke to OMB and got greater clarity, and they put out a revised, memo to provide more clarity, which certainly was helpful, to make clear that things like SNAP were not being frozen. But look, anytime you're going to make cuts, there's going to be people who are upset about it. There's going to be people who push back on it. but we have to be honest and have a realistic discussion about all of this. We are $36 trillion in debt. Everybody says, wow, that's so bad. We got to deal with this. Everybody says they understand it. But then the moment you actually start talking about cuts, cue the full-fledged meltdown. I'm not in any way diminishing or disputing the fact that there are legitimate things that should not be cut. And there are legitimate programs that serve a critical purpose. And as we have been working through some of these suggested cuts, I have pushed back, as it pertains to the impact it would have on New York, or the impact it would have on my district, or the impact it would have on hospitals, and certainly from a healthcare perspective. So, this is a function that you're going to have to work through step by step. That's why you can't just take a sledgehammer to the budget, or use a butcher's knife. You really do need to use a scalpel. You need to go line by line. You need to understand the direct impact it would have if you make this change or tweak. So that's what we're working through. I'm sure in the end there's going to be something that I don't like in there, but it's something that, you have to be willing to work through this if we're going to find compromise and we're going to get to a final bill. But I think the key obviously is to have a honest, rational discussion about it, and work through the numbers, work through what the actual impact is. There are things in the conference that many of us fully agree on, work requirements, for instance. That's a pretty easy one for every Republican to sign on to. So there are ways to address some of the spending issues as we work through it, to actually address the debt and deficit in a meaningful way while continuing to grow the economy, increase domestic production of energy, secure the border, and obviously have a tax bill that is effective for the American people.
So,
as a New York City resident, fight for that salt.
Yeah. Got it. No worries.
I'm a New York City resident, and I oppose it.
Real quick though, does on salt, what is it that aside from a complete and utter cap removal, is there a number that you would be comfortable with?
So I introduced a bill to lift the cap from 10,000 to 100,000 for individuals, 200,000 for married couples. Now, look, unlimited would be great. And when we've met with the president, he agrees with us about the need to lift the cap. He fully understands the impact it's had on a state like New York, and the importance of addressing the issue. I understand unlimited is probably going to be very difficult to get. So I'm very willing to engage in a negotiation, because at the end of the day, again, it requires 218. We could sit and argue. We can sit and debate the policy itself. Nobody's going to convince each other of the merits of the policy. I though, on the politics, am very clear. If we do nothing, salt comes back unlimited. So for my colleagues that are opposed to it, it's in their interest to actually negotiate in good faith. From my standpoint, the alternative minimum tax coming back would be a disaster for New York. So it's in, my interest to negotiate and make sure that doesn't happen while we get salt back, which means ultimately you're going to have to find a compromise.
All right, there's a million topics we want to get to, and we want to get community questions in a second, but let's go to Fox News now, who's interviewing the new White House press secretary, because it's one of the topics we want to discuss. So go ahead and take that live. We'll just listen for a bit to Dana and Bill talking to Karen.
Our shirts from Custom Ink help bring us
together in deportation efforts, and that's something President Trump has made very clear to our allies on Capitol Hill as well.
Caroline, I'm going to call you Caroline No Binder Levitt, which is an impressive feat, I have to say, especially on the first day, and quite a contrast indeed. I'm interested in a couple things. One, I want you to listen to these Blue City mayors. They want to give ICE the runaround. Watch.
We are in intense and scary times for so many
All
of our
right,
community
let's
members
dump that.
and federal
Just let's go
government
around
can
and everybody,
implement
starting with
their
Sean.
laws, and
Tell me
we
how
are
you
not.
think she did yesterday, and what you think it says about what kind of press secretary she'll be, Sean.
It was excellent. She did a phenomenal job answering questions. It was a breath of fresh air after 4 years of being the questions evaded, or I'll circle back to you. I thought what it also showed to me is that the press secretary has access again to the president, which is the goal of any press secretary, to have access and speak on behalf of her principal in lieu of them able to speak for themselves. She noted that she had just spoke to the president just a moment before going out, that she'd spoken to him last night. I don't know that Karine Jean-Pierre had spoken to Biden in months. And the reality that how she handled the press, her tone and tenor, her availability, I was proud to see her bring back, acknowledge not only restoring the 400 plus media passes that Karine Jean-Pierre had stripped from journalists without any blowback from the legacy media, and also talk about ways in which she was going to enhance the opportunities for creators and influencers to come into the White House and be able to have access to government officials was excellent. So kudos all around. I give her a 10.
So the White House press, the New York Times coverage of her opening press conference, the headline was, White House press secretary makes steely and unflinching debut. She did dodge some questions, as press secretaries do. But just now, that was retweeted. The image of the headline was retweeted by Ian Sams, who was the Biden spokesperson for the counsel's office, mocking the headline, steely even, unflinching, exclamation point. And Eric Schultz, who's Barack Obama's press person, retweeted that. The reason I'm saying this, Congressman, is the Democrats are clearly frustrated that they've lost at least some of their home court advantage with the media, because that's a pretty favorable headline for a Donald Trump spokesperson. I don't know how much of the briefing you got to see. I'm sure you saw at least clips. How do you think she did?
I saw clips. I thought Caroline did a great job. It's obviously, as Sean can attest, it's not the easiest job in the world. All eyes are on you, and you get some pretty tough, direct, pointed questions. And I thought she handled them very, very well. I think, when you look at the press secretaries under President Trump versus Joe Biden, I don't even think it's close. I don't even think it's a debate. I think Karine Jean-Pierre was one of the worst press secretaries I've ever seen in our history. And I think, to Sean's point, part of that is she didn't have a principal she could actually engage with. It is very clear. Donald Trump has probably answered more press questions in his first week than Joe Biden did in the last 2 years. And I don't even think that's an exaggeration. I think if you actually went and counted up all the questions, I think that's true. And that speaks volumes, I think, to, really what we've been witnessing for the last, certainly the last 2 years, but during Joe Biden's term. The press obviously is going to go at it with Caroline. I don't think anybody should be fooled by the New York Times headline. There will certainly be a lot of back and forth. But I think that's a good thing. That's part of our democracy. That is part of allowing for a robust press, a robust debate and discussion. I think, frankly, we've missed that. We have not had that over the Biden term. And so I think this is welcome. I think she'll do a great job. And I think ultimately, on her first day, I thought she acquitted herself very, very well.
Dan?
Yeah, she did a great job, period. But, two things. One, I believe Jen Psaki said the same thing on her first day. We're going to always tell you the truth from this podium. And I don't know a single press secretary or president that has always told the truth. And with all due respect to Trump in his first term, not a single person on here would say every day was completely honest, both from him and from the podium. The second thing is just, look, I'm glad the New York Times put that headline up, right? The Biden press operation, I don't know whether it was them or the principal or the senior advisors around the principal, was horrific. One of the reasons they found themselves in the trouble that they did, one of the reasons, as Harris kind of continued a similar strategy, that she lost. So yes, a new day is welcome, I think, by everyone who likes politics, but let's give it time to see just how honest that podium is a year from now. But it was a great first start.
Agreed. All right. She wasn't nervous, which is unusual because it was a big moment. Congressman, am I right that Bobby Kennedy either lived or pretended to live in your district?
Both. He did
Both.
live in he did live
Yeah.
in my district.
Yeah.
And
And he
then
pretended to live in your district.
and then
It's-
according to the Board of Elections, he pretended to live in my district.
So it's the 17th district. It concludes, I think this is still true, parts of Rockland, Westchester, Putnam, and Dutchess, right?
Correct.
Correct. Tell us, you're not in the House of Lords because you're a man of the people, but would you, if you were a senator, would you vote to confirm Bobby Kennedy?
I would want to hear his testimony. Obviously, there's areas of disagreement I have with him. I certainly want to hear more about his position on vaccines, for instance. Though, on any of these issues, I don't think it's as black and white as people try to make it. Even on the issue of vaccines, there's legitimate questions to be raised and issues to be discussed when you're talking about vaccines. But that being said, I think obviously some of the things that he has said in the past do raise concern. I think he, though, has a responsibility to answer that. So I would want to see his answers on that. I disagreed with him, for instance, on things like shutting down Indian Point nuclear power plant in my district. He was the one who championed that and got his former brother-in-law, Andrew Cuomo, to do it. So, there's things that I certainly have had concern about in the past. But I think what you've seen with President Trump, he has put forth people who can articulate his vision for these departments and agencies. I think underneath a lot of the heads are the people who very much are the subject matter experts. And, I think obviously President Trump has a right to his nominees and to have them receive a fair hearing and a vote one way or the other. So I would say, I would likely support him, but I would want to see obviously what his responses are if I were a senator, but I'm not.
One question, one word answer for all of you, and then we're going to open it up to folks. There's a million topics we didn't cover here, but I'm hoping we get to good ones in the questions. If you were Team Kennedy, Trump, which Republican senator's vote most concerns you right now? Which Republican senator most concerns you? Dan.
I'd start with Cassidy, the chair. He still won't say it, and you tend to follow the top a little bit.
Sean?
Cassidy.
Yeah. Congressman?
I would say Cassidy as well. I think obviously he's going to have a big say in this.
In the words of the immortal John McLaughlin, you all stumbled inexorably into the truth. It's Senator Cassidy, and we'll see what he does. He's presiding over tomorrow's hearing. This job requires confirmation hearings in both committees, and he's on both committees, chair of the second committee. So we will see. All right, bring folks in. Any topic you wish. Peace, love, and understanding. Presumption of grace as always. Sarah, welcome in. Tell folks where you are and what's on your mind after you unmute.
I'm from Massachusetts. So thanks for putting Mayor Wu on when she was saying she was concerned about what ICE is doing and how scared she is, because I just don't get it. So I think a lot of people in the state will be happy that they're coming in. But a couple of comments. So in the past 5 months, I've traveled twice to Europe. First time, everyone I ran into in the fall before the election hated Trump in Europe. We're not surprised to hear that. But was surprised at some of the things people said because it was obvious they didn't have the facts. Fine. Then I was over there last week and happened to stumble across the CNN docu-hour type thing on Trump. And I just couldn't believe it. And it was just not factual. And it dawned on me that a lot of people across the world are getting a very limited viewpoint of our current president. I begrudgingly voted for him. I was on once before and said that I voted for Clinton and I voted for Biden. I feel like I'm a Republican. I am definitely conservative in my values, but I have had some problems with the Republican Party. and some of their stances over the year, but I squarely fit into that group, and I'm probably more of a libertarian than anything. So I do think something needs to be done in terms of, like, I wish they could have a platform like this. And I don't know if, I know you're on YouTube, but it would be good for people to hear more balanced point of view.
Like Donald Trump, we have expansionist inclinations. We believe in the manifest destiny of two ways. So don't worry, we'll be expanding to Europe, Asia, Middle East. Don't worry.
It seriously concerns me. Yeah. There is no balanced reporting and back and forth. It is all one side, and it's not good for America. I listened last night, Mark. Usually I listen to the YouTubes afterwards instead of joining live. I appreciate the empathy that you gave to the woman who wrote in, who was a Democrat. But even within that email, I still find it very difficult when people write things like, well, I'm for women's rights and I'm a Democrat. Well, I'm for women's rights and I voted Republican. And I think that people have to start getting away from certain phrases, because I don't know what women's rights mean anymore. And I think that people have to start talking more about the issues instead of using these buzzwords, because before the election, things like that were being thrown out there. Have you heard one person bring up the words women's rights since November 5th? It just doesn't mean anything anymore. And I think people have to talk more about what they're directly saying. So I wish with that viewer that she would expand outside of being very upset. Okay, so one last thing, and then I do have, since the congressman's here, it'd be great to hear from him as well. And I would be interested in hearing Sean's thoughts on this. But I do think that both parties are missing it. I think right now there's a lot of focus on the Democrats, but my anxiety level has gone through the roof. I think that Americans don't like these political games, and we don't like all these snippets being thrown out at us. I don't think we needed all of these executive orders. I don't even know what's being done, but I don't want a repeat of Obama slamming down 3,000 pages of a bill that no one read and admitted that they didn't read and are still angry about it. So I wish that Donald Trump would do what he did after he's elected. He stayed away from the media. He put together his plan, and then he'd come out and explain. So I think with Mike, Congressman, and Sean, can you talk a little bit about whether or not you see a future within the Republican Party of maybe stepping back a little bit and realizing it wasn't a mandate for all these issues? And Congressman, respectfully, I think you kind of said, well, this is what we were voted in to do at one point earlier. I don't think that's it. I think that Donald Trump won the election, but I don't think that means that we all want just Donald Trump. I want to hear what Mike Lawler thinks. And I know you've got a lot of good views, but I don't want to necessarily have everything Donald Trump wants.
Yeah, Sarah, great
part
set
of my
topics.
statement today.
Great set of topics, Sarah. Thank you. Congressman, have at it. There are lots you could respond to, but particularly maybe the last point about who speaks for the party, and is it just a Trump party, or are there other Republicans who can come forward with separate ideas? And you've been as independent as anybody in the House has.
Yep. So I often quote former New York City Mayor Ed Koch, a Democrat, who would say, if you agree with me on 9 out of 12 things, vote for me. If you agree with me on 12 out of 12 things, go have your head examined. We're not all going to agree on everything, and we shouldn't. That's why we actually have a constitutional republic. It's why we have a democracy. No, just because Donald Trump won doesn't mean that everything he wants to do is what's going to happen. Obviously, if you look at the House, there are 220 Republicans, 215 Democrats. I'm one of 3 members that won in a seat Kamala Harris won. So it's me, Brian Fitzpatrick, and Don Bacon. And, my objective is not to be an impediment or a thorn. My objective is to actually advocate for and fight for my constituents and my district, push back where I have to, but ultimately actually get shit done. I didn't come to Washington to just sit and pontificate. I actually want to get things done. So in order to do that, though, it's a very simple math. You need 218 votes in the House. There are no Pyrrhic victories in politics. It is 50 plus 1. That's it. You either win your election and you can govern, or you pass legislation and it gets signed into law. That's it. That's what, at the end of the day, that's what governing is about. And the only way you get there is by building coalitions. And sometimes those coalitions will be a party line only vote. Sometimes those coalitions will be bipartisan. I have proven to be a very bipartisan person. I was rated the 4th most bipartisan person in the last Congress. I passed 11 bills, 6 were signed into law by Joe Biden. So to me, my objective is to focus on the issues. Now, what I did say that we did have a mandate on was a few things. Number one, obviously the economy is paramount. The issue of affordability, the policy perspectives that Republicans have talked about within that realm. Energy policy, increasing domestic production of energy is critical. Securing the border and deporting criminal aliens. If you look at those issues, that is by and large what the substance of the campaign was about, both for president and for most of the congressional and Senate seats. And so, yes, those are areas where I do believe we do have a mandate to govern and to deliver on it, and a responsibility to do so. When you start getting into some of the other things, yeah, it gets a little more challenging. And that's why, for instance, on some of the spending cuts, there's not going to be total alignment or agreement on certain things because, you know what, my district is very different than Chip Roy's district. And that's just a reality. And so, you know, we all have a responsibility to represent our districts and our own points of view, but you do have a responsibility to work together. And I think one of the things that is so emblematic of the problem today in government, in politics, everybody acts like a petulant child. If I don't get my way 100%, I'm going to stomp my feet. I'm going to scream. I'm going to go to the press. I'm going to tell them how awful everything is. And then I'm not going to vote with the team. Or you can actually act like an adult and negotiate for the best possible deal you can get, advocate for your perspective, and recognize that, you know what, you may get 80% of what you want, and that's a lot better than 0% of what you want. And
Sean.
so I choose
sorry.
to focus on getting the 80% and getting shit done.
Sean.
Concur.
Okay. Sarah, thank you. Come back regularly. Appreciate it. And I'm glad we got to show you a peek of your mayor. Raleigh, federal worker smoking a cigar makes that you have no child or pet with you, but nonetheless, federal worker smoking cigars trumps a lot. So welcome in. Tell folks who don't know where you are and where you work and what's on your mind.
I'm in Austin and I work for the Treasury Department. And I was saying I got that email last night. It was really weird. It didn't look like it came from anything else in the government. It was from it looked like spam.
Yeah, they created some new
It
alias.
looked fake.
Yeah. Yeah. So are you thinking of taking the buyout?
No. No, I just thought that y'all would have questions on that, and I got it, and I did see it. It came in at 8:29, and yeah,
Before the pandemic, did you work in the office 5 days a week?
I did not work there before the pandemic. I've only been there 3 years now.
Okay. And how many days a week do you go to an office?
I go 1 day a week.
1 day a week. Would you be willing to go 5 days a week?
I would, yes.
And
Well,
do you expect you'll have to now?
You're going to have to go 5 days?
I don't know yet. I haven't heard from anyone yet, so.
And is there a text chain or a WhatsApp or anything between you and your colleagues where you all have been discussing this?
We can't talk on those platforms. You can only talk on platforms that have been approved, and that, you know, it's we can only talk on Teams. We don't use Zoom.
Yeah. So have you had communication with your colleagues about how they're
I have
reacting?
not. It came on when my TOD was over, when it came my shift was over, and my boss hasn't called me or anything about it.
All right. Anybody else have questions for Ollie?
Yeah, I got one because it's been in the news a lot. Do you have an office where all the employees could go to work anymore? Yeah, exactly. The federal government has been shedding real estate. They don't have enough office space, even if they want to.
They took away, I had a cubicle for the first year, and they had surplus space. They had surplus employees that they needed to use the space for, and they took it away from me.
Yeah. And by the way, a lot of private companies did the same thing. They've
Yeah.
been shedding real
Yeah.
estate. Yep.
Yeah. Congressman, I saw some reports. I know it's this directed to me, but the administration estimates that 5 to 10% of the workforce will take the buyout. Seems impossible that they could actually have even an educated guess. Are you concerned that too many or too few people will do this? Do you sort of support the idea of just throwing it out there and seeing what happens?
I don't have a problem with the president putting forth that idea. I mean, I've worked in municipal government. We've done this from time to time to try and address some of the issues within the workforce. So the concept of a buyout's obviously one that is used by state and municipal governments all the time.
How about the executive branch setting the terms without consulting with Congress, basically saying people have to decide in a week and they get paid through September? Is that something Congress should have a say in, or it's okay with you if the executive just makes it up?
No, I don't. I personally do not have an objection to the executive branch putting that forward. I mean, frankly, governors do that all the time. Town supervisors, mayors. That's part of the role of being the executive. I mean, you have a responsibility to oversee and manage the workforce. There's not, 435 members of Congress and all their opinions, frankly, would just kind of get in the way there. So you need somebody to actually manage the workforce. That clearly hasn't been happening for 4 years. I think President Trump taking charge there, I don't object to. I think at the end of the day, we'll see how many people actually take that opportunity. I'll be curious what that number actually is. The workforce, the commercial space issue certainly is one that we see it in New York City. There's a commercial real estate crisis in New York City. You obviously have had a lot of businesses in a post-COVID world realize they don't need to operate from Midtown Manhattan, and they don't need to utilize all of that commercial space. I do think there's a balance to be struck here. I do think there is something to be said about people being in an office and being in touch with each other in person. And being able to kind of manage more effectively the workforce. But we live in a different world today than 20 years ago. And so obviously remote work is become a little bit more, acceptable and a reality. I think obviously the point the president is making, though, is when you're looking at these numbers in totality, it is a little absurd how many people are actually working from home. So it's trying to strike a balance here, I think.
Yeah, Raleigh, thank you. Appreciate it. Let us know what happens in your office if you can. Brett, welcome in. Would love to know where you are, not just what city and state, but what that environment is, because it looks like you're hard at work. And
I am at work, yeah.
What do you do for a living, sir, and where are you?
I do research on agricultural plants like corn, and I'm actually up in Ottawa, Ontario, no state.
Okay. Welcome in. Thank you for joining. What's on your mind, sir?
From the state capital in Canada.
Yeah.
I was going to say, it is the 51st state to be, no?
Yeah, it's supposed to be. I don't know. That's kind of
52nd,
my question, I guess. Well, I think we'd want about 6 states for the amount of people we have, but the tariffs coming in, are they actually going to happen on February 1st? And does everybody really know what that's going to do in the U.S.?
Great question. So
I guess for Sean or Mike. I guess Mike's a congressman from New York,
Congressman,
so
what do
maybe he
you
could answer
say?
that.
25% tariffs coming this weekend on our neighbors to the north?
We'll see if it takes effect. I mean, that's certainly the threat. We saw obviously how quickly Colombia folded.
Yeah.
You know, when the president threw that out there. You know, look, I think obviously it is very much in part a negotiating tool. You know, with respect to some of these issues that we're dealing with. Obviously, Canada could choose to retaliate or you know, do certain things. You know, obviously when you look at you know, refined oil, that obviously is an issue in terms of direct cost to Americans that could be problematic. So you know, this is something where we're going to see how this tango goes. Ultimately, I would say Canada is very reliant on the U.S. We are reliant on them in some respects as well. There's no question about that. Frankly, the upstate New York economy is very reliant on Montreal. That has always been true. So, you know, there's obviously an important relationship here, but I think there's no question the president is trying to put some pressure on some of our allies, especially when it comes to issues of trade or border security. And making sure that they are being good partners.
Brett, I think there's, by coincidence, a 25% chance that a 25% tariff will be put on this weekend. But if it is, it will be gone within 5 days because the Canadians will cave and it'll be removed. That's my view.
Yeah.
Sean?
What are the terms? That's kind of what my curiosity is, because there's a lot of different theories in Canada.
Will be in there.
Yeah, because the carve out for oil is a big one, and then the Canadian government is talking about putting an export tariff on the U.S. for oil if they exempt it.
Yeah.
There's so much internal politics that could go on for 2 hours.
I think to Mark's point, though, the reality is that the U.S. has the upper hand here. And
oh yeah, definitely.
the Canadians know that. So
and
we
remember,
do.
remember, Secretary Rubio is meeting with the foreign minister today, and I suspect that it won't reach a conclusion, but I bet she'll understand what your government needs to do in order to avoid this. And again, I don't, you know, Donald Trump could tweet on Sunday, 25% tariffs in place. It doesn't mean it's actually happening, and it could then turn around. Sean, you're a man of a student of Donald Trump and a master bluffer.
He's got to do it. Caroline doubled down on it yesterday, and the point is, if he doesn't, the teeth is gone from the threat. So he can't go out there, say it, she doubles down, and then the date rolls around and nothing happens. Now, I agree with you that it may not last long, but he has to show everyone that he's, you know, you can't back away from the fight right away. So I don't know how long it will last, but it's going to happen.
It'll last as long as the cheese stays hot on some French fries. That's how long it'll last. Dan.
Well, I think that the key for what Sean just said, and the key to this is they have not defined victory. So he'll do it. He'll make up victory, claim it, and get out. Right. So his chest is out. He's tough. He acted. He got a pound of flesh, whatever it is, and he'll move on.
Well, remember your point about the timing, Mark. The first is Saturday. So the effect of a tariff on a Saturday or Sunday is really unknown. So he will, by Monday morning, when anything would have taken effect, I think we will have a deal.
Brett, if you could unilaterally make Canada a state or not, would you vote yes or no?
I can't actually hear you right now. My headphones died.
Okay.
So
all right, Brett, thank you.
I'll let you go.
Great question. All right. Welcome in. Daryl, question for the congressman. Unmute, tell us where you are, and ask away.
Yes, I'm actually in Pennsylvania, outside of Philadelphia. I was part of your undecided Pennsylvania voters panel.
Yes, sir.
I ended up voting for Trump, if anybody was curious.
We are curious and also not surprised. Daryl, welcome. Thanks for coming back. And question for the congressman.
Yeah, Mike, I just wanted to, first of all, thank you for the support you did for the Armenian situation when Azerbaijan invaded. And, you know, there was a lot of U.S. weaponry that went to them. And it's pretty crazy that we're, funding that sort of forced relocation of those people. So I just wanted to commend you for the bravery and courage that it took to, stand up to some of our crazy foreign policy. So thank you.
My pleasure.
My question is actually related to that. I know you're a very strong supporter of Israel, and I'm just wondering if you could apply that same kind of moral clarity to the situation in Gaza. I mean, millions of people have been relocated, and hundreds of thousands of innocent people have been killed, women and children. American doctors who worked over there in hospitals have reported that IDF soldiers shot children in the head. So I know you're a strong supporter of Israel, but where can we get some criticism of the terrible things they did with weaponry from the United States?
Well, a few things. Number one, I don't know where your numbers are coming from with respect.
Well, the Lancet reports estimates that at least 200,000 innocent people have been killed.
But here's the reality of this situation. None of this would have happened but for Hamas doing what it did on October 7th. And this conflict that has occurred in Gaza is in an urban center, which, is certainly very difficult to wage a war in an urban center. Imagine a war being waged in Philadelphia or New York City. It would be extremely difficult to do that without obviously having some level of collateral damage. I fundamentally believe that this conflict could have ended a lot sooner on two fronts. Number one, obviously, had the hostages been released much quicker, but Hamas obviously recognized that was a leverage point they had. And two, if the Biden administration did not handcuff Israel's ability to wage this war. You can't give weaponry and then say, but you can only use it in this manner, or you can't do this, you can't go here, you can't go after these individuals. This conflict could have ended a lot sooner. And frankly, had Israel listened to Biden and Blinken and Jake Sullivan, Nasrallah would still be alive, Sinwar would still be alive, Assad would still be in power in Syria, and Iran's air defenses would still be intact. So for me, I understand obviously the humanitarian toll that has been wrought here. We see it in Ukraine as well, with what Russia has done and the impact that has had. I want this conflict to come to an end. I don't want to see innocent lives lost. But when you are dealing with a terrorist entity that uses its own people as shields, that sets up operation intentionally under hospitals, under schools, that is using a United Nations entity in UNRWA to assist and to funnel resources and funds and to take humanitarian aid and assistance, it makes it very difficult. And for me, at the end of the day, if you want peace in the Middle East, if you want, a two-state solution, if that is what your viewpoint is, the fastest way for that to occur and the most lasting way for that to occur is for Arab states to recognize Israel's right to exist and normalize relations with them. And that's why one of the things that I've been so heavily focused on has been the Abraham Accords, getting Saudi Arabia to the table. Saudi Arabia is going to be critical to helping rebuild in Gaza. It cannot be a U.S.-led or Israeli-led solution. It is going to have to be an Arab-led solution. But it is also critical to crack down on Iran. And that's why I fought to get the SHIP Act passed and the Iran-China Energy Sanctions Act passed. 93% of Hamas's funding comes from Iran. And where they get their funds is the illicit oil trade between China and Iran. to the tune of $200 billion increase under Joe Biden. So there are a lot of layers to this. It is not, going to be solved overnight. I certainly understand the humanitarian part of it. I certainly don't want to see innocent people killed. If there are specific instances where someone in the IDF or otherwise did something to a innocent person intentionally, then obviously that's something that should be investigated and looked at.
Well, if I could interrupt you on that point.
Daryl, it's got to be super quick because we're at
Yeah,
time.
real quick. I just want to encourage you, Congressman, and I appreciate that it's a very complex situation. I understand that. I would encourage you to look at some of the reporting that's coming out from American doctors, surgeons who worked in the hospitals about some of the things that they saw, children being shot in the head with bullets from IDF soldiers. That should be looked at.
Okay, Daryl,
That's
thank
all
you.
I have to say.
Daryl, thank you.
To do
Appreciate
that.
it.
Thank you.
Appreciate it. Congressman, very grateful to you for joining and for taking questions. Didn't get to ask you about your gubernatorial campaign, so we hope you'll come back to discuss that and other things. And you're welcome here anytime. And again, we're appreciative of you making time. And by the way, Mr. Trump's policy is you can take not just the towels, but the bathrobe. And if there's no room, in your suitcase, the front desk will provide you a Trump Doral duffel bag. Sean, is that wrong?
I think Mikhail, who runs Trump Doral, would have a problem with that. But check with him.
Check, but I'm pretty sure.
I'll ask at the front desk.
Yeah, pretty sure.
All right. Thank you, Mark. Thanks, everybody. Appreciate it.
Thank you. Thank you. We'll see you soon. And again, grateful to you for making the hour for us. All right, gentlemen. Tonight, 6 o'clock Eastern time, two-way tonight. Full coverage of Bobby Kennedy's hearing, some of the other confirmation hearings, the executive orders, lots going on. Brian Wolf and Matt Gorman will join us, two good blabbers, good talkers. I mean that in a positive way. Yes.
All right. I've got an announcement for you that's going to shock you.
Do it quick because I got to be on Smirkanish in 2 minutes.
Oh, sorry. 6 o'clock tonight.
Yeah.
I'm actually talking your favorite subject, Enrique Terrio, from one of the pardoned January 6th guys.
Yeah.
Come on. I will be talking about pardons in January 6th. So
has he done a lot of interviews already?
He actually did. I saw him go do CNN, which normally that would get, but it's
a demonstration of how collegial I am is watch Sean's show. Skip two-way tonight. Just watch.
Oh, come on.
And we'll be back 9 a.m. tomorrow for this program, and hopefully many of you will be back. I know a lot of folks had their hands up, including some first-timers. I apologize we didn't get to you. Please come on tonight at 6 or come back tomorrow at 9, and we'll have more time for questions. Thanks, everybody. Have a great day.